evening and welcome to HotHouse Meets Havana. I'm Marguerite Horberg and one of the producers of this event and founder of the Cultural Center HotHouse, which is now celebrating our 34th anniversary this year. Tonight's special Martin Luther King Day program opens our 5-night festival and honors the special relationship cultural practitioners have explored stemming from their mutual roots in the African diaspora. We are honored to have James Early moderate this discussion. A longtime advocate for cultural diversity and equity issues in national and international cultural and educational institutions, his applied research explores participatory musicology, cultural democracy, statecraft policy, capitalist and socialist discourses in cultural policy, and Afro-Latin politics, history, and cultural democracy. Joining Dr. Early are James Sanders, Jean-Christophe Leroy, Arturo O'Farrill, and Michelle Rosewoman. Throughout this program, we will be inserting their brief bios in the chat and linking the full program on our website, hothouse.net. We invite you to find out more about these amazing artists and additionally support their work by visiting their website. Opening the program will be a version of James Weldon Johnson's Lift Every Voice, sung today by the duo Shazah, Shanta Narula, and Zara Baker. We hope you will join us this coming Thursday through Sunday for the rest of the festival. Tickets and more information is on our website. From all of us in Chicago, we hope you will enjoy the show, and mucho abrazos.
My name is Shanta.
Hi, I'm Zara.
And when we work together, we call ourselves Shazah. We're really excited, really thankful to be participating in this evening concert sponsored by HotHouse Global.
Yay!
The HotHouse as an institution has been in our lives for a long, long time.
Yeah.
It's been a space, a safe space in which to express and explore and develop as artists. And it's been a place where we can also partake in the art of other cultures and be able to interact with people from all over the world who speak that common language called music. This evening, I will be playing this instrument, this sitar. Can't all fit in this shot at once. But this is an instrument that I I was able to obtain about 50 years ago in a small town in India, where I was doing one of the study abroad programs connected to the college that I attended.
Mm-hmm.
Zara is going to be, what are you going to be doing?
I'm going to be doing a little bit of singing and sound exploration.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have what was the instrument you were playing?
I was playing the rain stick, which I made.
Could you show that again?
Oh, okay. It's actually covered in fabric. And I think I filled it with rice.
So that's like a PCV pipe or something?
It's actually like plastic poster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to mix it up some. We'll be playing some music that comes out of the African American experience. And we'll see where else that takes us.
Yeah. Some music that comes from the indigenous, the way back. Way back.
The way back.
Yeah, the way back.
Playing from the way back and right now.
Right.
And the might be.
I like that. The chastening rod felt in the days when hope and born had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not a weary feet come to a place for which our parents sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. Oh, we yet with a steady beat. Till now we stand at last.
Hola, Cuba. Hello, Chicago and all of the United States of America. And welcome to the world, to the Chicago HotHouse 2021 Cuba Jazz Festival of extraordinary citizen artists participating in this exciting, timely roundtable. Cuba, the conversation continues. Taking our title from the recording of Arturo O'Farrill, one of the great musicians, art, cultural diplomats with us for this exchange. My name is James Early, and I have the honor of moderating this artist roundtable, one of the ongoing HotHouse U.S. Global exchanges with Cuba and the multiple realms of HotHouse's mission to produce and facilitate multidisciplinary music, exhibitions, humanities events that foster respect, mutual beneficial international exchange of ideas, and social justice engagements between and among peoples and nations. In February 2020, HotHouse produced the Chicago Guantanamo Blues Festival to educate global audiences about Guantanamo, Cuba as a distinguished site of Afro-descendant Cuban art and music culture, in contrast to the global media coverage of the US military base occupation of Guantanamo and International Detention Center of torture. In July 2020, HotHouse collaborated with the Instituto Cubano de la Música to produce a two-day concert of renowned virtuoso artists and cultural workers from around the world, which also honored Cuba's Henry Reed's Medical Brigade for global contributions to contain and eradicate the COVID-19 pandemic. Check it out at hothouse.net. Today, January 18th, is the annual US celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who in 1964 at the opening of the Berlin Jazz Festival said, "Jazz speaks for life. When life itself offers no order or meaning, the musician creates an order and meaning." Dr. King's farsighted understanding of the fullness of jazz musicians and their uplifting creativity and their national and global civic contributions describes the HotHouse Roundtable and the 2021 Jazz Festival in Havana as one of the many ongoing US bridges of respect, mutually beneficial relations between US citizens, and our aspirations for a just, meaningful relationship from the new US government with the Cuban people and their government stewards. Now it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you in conversation with Cuba, the 2021 Chicago HotHouse Stellar Musician Bridge builders between the US and Cuba. Their full biographies can be found on the HotHouse website. Michelle Rosewoman is an American jazz pianist living in New York City with more than a 30-year history that foregrounds her as a visionary, gifted pianist, composer, band leader, educator, and performer. She is known for her work and recordings with her Quintessence Ensemble, as well as her New Yoruba Ensemble. Arturo O'Farrill, pianist, composer, and educator, was born in Mexico and grew up in New York City. Founding director of the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, he extends the legacy of his late father, Chico O'Farrill, Cuban jazz trumpeter, composer, arranger, conductor, distinguished contributor to what is Afro-Latin jazz. Jean-Christophe Leroy, is a percussionist of French, Vietnamese, and Canadian descent living in Chicago. He's deeply involved with the Afro-Cuban religion Santeria and participates in religious ceremonies as an Omo Anya, priest of the drum, and also serves as a Balbalao, a high priest of Santeria. And violinist James Sanders leads the Latin jazz group James Sanders Conjunto, as well as the Proyecto Libre, an ensemble of free improvisation and Afro-Caribbean traditions. He formed the Dark Matter String Band in 2018 to interpret the tradition of African-American acoustic string music in a contemporary context. So now to begin, Cuba, a continuing conversation. Please welcome Michelle Rosewoman, who will talk about how she is situated around Cuba, Cuban music, Cuban musicians, Cuban culture, a question that all of our panelists will take up. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. Great to be here. Saludo a todos. Yo quiero empezar saludando a los antepasados y a los mayores folcloristas, santeros y músicos cubanos. Mojiba Boboegu que timbelece Olumare. Saludos a todos los Olubata, Yalocha, Babalocha y Aworumila. And as Martin Luther King said, we may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. We're deeply connected, and we are here today to deepen our connections. Cuba is in our heart, in our hearts and our minds, and we pray for your health and your well-being. I want to start by expressing my eternal love and gratitude for my padrino, the great dancer and actor Alberto Morgan, Oniosun Ibai. He passed away a year ago, and he was a part of the Conjunto Folclórico Nacional for some years. He choreographed almost all of Orlando Puntilla Rio's shows here in the U.S., Ibai. And he's also known as the greatest Babaluaye dancer. Dr. Rogelio Fude called him that, and saludos to Mr. Fude. So also my padrino has many godchildren in Cuba. Tiene muchos ahijados en Cuba. Ustedes son mi familia y mando mi saludo y bendiciones a todos ustedes. So thank you. I wanted to start with proper, representation and honoring those that I should. And as far as my relationship to Cuban music, my musical and spiritual lives are pretty much wrapped around each other. And playing piano since young, but I got into playing percussion and learning Cuban folkloric rhythms at an early age. My love for Cuban folklore drew me strongly to the Yoruba religion, and I actually met my padrino and madrina through master folklorist Orlando Puntilla Rios. I was a part of a vibrant scene, a soundscape here in New York, where Puntilla, Daniel Ponce, Ignacio Berroa, and other really great Cuban musicians came in the early 80s. So that was a site of a lot of interaction and excitement, and we were experimenting, bringing jazz and Cuban traditions together, and a lot came of that time for a lot of us. I'll just say that all of that prepared me for something I've done with all my heart since 1983, when I formed New Yoruba featuring Puntilla, and he was the featured member for 25 years. New Yoruba, the name, pays homage to the musical journey of the ancient Yoruba culture from Nigeria through Cuba to present-day New York with its contemporary manifestations. Puntilla was my teacher, treasured associate, and I miss him deeply. Much has happened since in terms of my evolution and involvement with great Cuban musicians, but I'll leave it there to say these were my beginnings, and I treasure them greatly.
So, Arturo, you have a special familial history and legacy through your Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra. Would you talk about that history and the importance of this moment of participating in the Havana Jazz Festival 2021?
Of course I will. It's funny that Michelle began with paying homage to the ancestors. My mother transitioned 3 years ago, and this very day. And I also want to acknowledge my father, Chico O'Farrill, who transitioned 20 years ago, and the real legacy of my padrino, Marcos Antonio Fernandez, and the people in my family in Cuba. And every time I think about you guys, I might start crying. Yasek, Jesus, my people, man, I love you. I miss you so much. And I think about the suffering that you're going through now. And it's hard for me to take. Sometimes I get really crazy about it. But I started going to Cuba. At first, I couldn't go because my father was Chico O'Farrill. He was a big band composer. He was actually just a huge composer. He did a lot of things. But he left Cuba when he was a young man. I think he must have been about 22 or 23, and came to New York and started working with Benny Goodman and Count Basie and eventually Machito. But he never went back. He never was able to go back, and he was broken about it. He spoke about this place as if it was the most unbelievably beautiful place on earth, and he died without seeing his native homeland because he was afraid of the Cuban American population in Miami that was threatening to boycott his music. When I looked at him and I said, "Dad, they don't really listen to your music anyway," but he didn't want to hear about that. So in 2002, Chucho Valdez invited me to the Plaza Jazz Festival to perform on a program with Gonzalo Rubalcaba and Chucho. Solo piano, that's pretty scary stuff to be on the same stage as Gonzalo and Chucho. But I went, and here's exactly what happened. I had misgivings about it. I was freaking out. I thought I was, contrary to my father, contrary to my family, and the problems they had with the Communist Party and blah, 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 blah. I got there, and I felt my ancestors reach up through the ground, and I literally got off the airplane, and I felt a hand just grab my heart and my being and bring me. I almost collapsed. It was so powerful. And since then, I've been going. This is the first time that I've been back in maybe a year. I was there at the Plaza de las Americas conference last year, and I literally been going back and forth to Cuba 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year, advocating on behalf of relations with Cuba. My music is rooted in all the different worlds of Cuba, in the religious world, in the mambo world, in the world of Aragon. Everything I do, as a matter of fact, is really informed by the diaspora and the people of Cuba. And I've spent time in Santiago. And so for me, Cuba is also a very special spiritual place because of the history of suffering that my people have gone through. The history of suffering, the decades and decades and decades and decades and decades of history of oppression and occupation is incredible to me, that you can go visit a people that have been through these experiences, and all they have to give is more love and more joy and more community. And so you go there and they're hungry, they're feeling this, they're feeling that, but they will give you the last sándwich de mayonesa. They will give you the last sándwich de mayonesa in their house. And it's just, I always feel, and I'll leave you with this statement because it comes from David Garden, who also travels a lot to Cuba. He's a photographer from Vermont. He says, in the United States, we're incredibly wealthy, technologically advanced, monetarily. We have everything, and yet we're starving. We are starving. You go to Cuba, where they literally have nothing, and they are rich, powerful, wealthy in culture and love and community. And I when I go there and when I take people there, I walk away being strengthened and being fed spiritually and nutritionally.
I traveled to Cuba for the last 45 years, and in my 32 years of professional work at the Smithsonian Institution, I was involved in establishing particularly cultural policies. But of all of the rich experiences I've had in Cuba, I must say the 2 occasions that I had with you and your family in Santiago, and then traveling back with your father's orchestra, were really 2 of the most extraordinary of some many, many really extraordinary occasions that I've had in Cuba. So Jean, Jean-Christophe Leroy. Tell us about your history and ties to Cuba. And
Well, it didn't start at birth because, as you mentioned, I'm Canadian, French, and Vietnamese. So I started out playing North American music for years, drum set, and then studying classical percussion. And, around university age, when I started studying classical percussion, I was exploring percussion from all around the world. And needless to say, Cuban music, when I started experimenting with Cuban music, it really attracted me. In 1994 was the first one. There was a program at the Banff Center of Fine Arts called Afro-Cubanismo. They had Iraqueri, Changuiro, Los Moniquitos, Afro-Cuba. That was my first time being immersed in that music. And at that point, I decided that's it. This is what I want to do. This is what I need to do. So I kind of went head first into Cuban music from then on. I studied it, started playing professionally. I didn't travel to Cuba right away because I didn't want to travel to Cuba and have somebody teach me how to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I wanted to really have as much of the music in me as possible before I went there. So, it was probably, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, I finally went to Cuba. And I was first studying with Jesus Alfonso from Los Moniquitos de Matanza. And we were hanging out one day, and I just went outside the sidewalk and started crying because, I've known about this culture. I've worked with a lot of Cubans before, and I've played the music before, but to actually be there finally, it was everything I could have hoped for and more. And like Arturo was saying, the people are so beautiful. I really got a sense, again, to repeat what Arturo was saying, I got a sense of how spiritually full the culture is and the people, as opposed to how empty. I don't want to speak for everybody, but there's an emptiness here, Even though we have everything we need, we're empty in a lot of spiritual ways. At that point, there wasn't any, set spirituality in my life. But as time went on, I started traveling back and forth to Cuba every couple of years. And eventually, your life and music and spiritual needs intersect. I was watching a band called Climax, Gerardo Piloto, and I really was attracted to the way the conguero played, Jesus Guille Lopez. So this is years ago, and I said, hey, Guille, can I come over to your house one day and hang out and, maybe learn some things from you? So I go there, and again, to refer to what Arturo was saying, they gave me the last food in the house. They fed me lunch, we hung out. Next thing I know, it's a week later, and I'm still out there in Juanelo. I didn't even go back to my place to stay. I was still out there a week later. From then on, every time I go to Cuba, I go straight to either straight to Jesus Alfonso's house until he passed away, Babetonu, and Guille, the conguero for Climax, he ended up becoming, first his wife, Barbara Mesa Lopez, Omiya Mea, Omiya Checonata, became my marina in Santo. So I made Santo with her, and then eventually Guille is a Babalao, he became my padrino in Ifa, or Baracana. That would have been about 6 years ago, and it's like a second home to me now. I'm not Cuban, but I love the culture, and I love the music, and I love to try and share it with people and do what I can, I guess that's about all I have to say.
James Sanders, tell us about your historical tie. What brought you into contact with Cuban musicians, Cuban culture?
Bueno, mi mamá era dominicana. My mother was Dominicana, and lo que voy a decir de mi mamá es que la música era la vida para ella, pero cuando ella estaba creada en la República Dominicana, no tenía la oportunidad de estudiar música. Entonces, sus hijos y la casa siempre estaba llena de música. And you know, not to lose the English audience, but you know, my mother, when I think of my mother, I have to speak Spanish because she would only speak Spanish to me. She never spoke English, you know, and I would walk in the house and I would start speaking English to her, and she would not respond to me, you know, because she said, no, you know, we will never communicate in English. But my mother had a love for music that was just like crazy. Like she couldn't stand silence, you know. And if a trumpet player came by, he would have to give us, my sister and I, a lesson, or an organ player, or whoever it was. If somebody knew something about music, she wanted them to come over to the house, have dinner, and we were going to play music. And I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and she didn't want me running in the street with the guys because they would, you know, they were they were into some bad stuff, right? So it was like from one music lesson to the other, and you know, and I didn't have time to hang out in the street because I was too busy going to music lessons. And I had a piano teacher for many years, Francisco Godino. He was a Cubano, and he had defected to the United States. And man, when Francisco sat down and gave you a lesson, it was like, if it was 20 minutes, it was 2.5 hours. If it was 20 minutes, I mean, it was like the whole afternoon, man, you know, and he would really get into it. I mean, it was no joke. And that was my relationship to him. I got my degrees in classical music, but, you know, through my childhood, I always heard the tumbao in the street, you know, kind of coming through the walls, you know. It was a lot of Puerto Rican salsa and stuff like that, you know, but because it was mostly Puerto Rican neighborhood, but that tumbao was like, it permeated like the air, you know. And so after I gotten my degrees in classical violin and I was working in orchestras and stuff like that, I started to be interested in playing jazz. And then I was working with a conguero, and he says, yeah, we need to get a bass. And then the minute I heard the tumbao, it was like, and I started playing, I realized that was sort of who I was, you know. That was it. That was like in my DNA or whatever, you know. And I've had good fortune to work with John Leroy for many years. And John is like one of the most knowledgeable people I know, and these other great musicians in Chicago. And it's just such an honor to be in this group with Michelle and Arturo. I mean, these are like giants, you know, people that I've admired for years and, you know, checked out their recordings. So I'm really glad to be here, but that is my connection to this music. It's by way of Dominican Republic, you know, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Good. Listen, thank you. I wondered in your bio what that Caribbean connection was. You know, I used to think that because I think around 1922, Cuba had the second major radio tower in this hemisphere. And I used to think that was why the music was just so resonant throughout the hemisphere. And then I went to Senegal, and, you know, 12, 15 bands who go back 3-4 generations playing, singing Cuban music in Spanish, composing in Spanish. And so it seems to me that you all have hit on a spiritual dimension that ordinarily when we think about music from other cultures, Brazil or someplace, somehow Cuba is distinguished. So I before we move forward with some of the other questions, I'd like for you to deepen for a public your understanding, bringing them into greater communication about this underlying spiritual dimension in the various genres that you play connected to Cuba. Michelle?
In the sense of our individual progressions, or just kind of the organic connections, or?
Wherever you feel it, wherever you want to take it.
Well, I mean, that's the magic of our music, isn't it? And where our musics meet, there's a magic in living your your path and being attuned. And the way one thing takes you to the next, it's spiritual in nature. Music is to me, absolutely. And the progression is, I can't tell any story without saying, wait, that started there. Oh, wait, that started there. And it seems that everything just kind of connects in that way. And that goes all the way back to when I first learned um, more spiritual type of rhythms and the cantos for the orishas, and the way that when I sat and practiced that, I would feel it change the air and the energy in the room. And the deeper that I connected, the more things came in my path. So I'm really enjoying learning more about all of you. And we have a lot, all of us, in common in that music is our way. It's our camino. And I think that Cuban music and jazz has a lot of organic connection. It's very natural that our musics join and that we're intrigued by each other in that way. I could refer to my first New Yoruba performance, which was like a 14-piece group, and I had, by the way, James, a lot of connections to the St. Louis bag artists from early on. I was neighbors with Baikita Carroll and met Oliver Lake, Julius Hemphill, and all the AACM people came through and stayed with him. So that was part of my personal direction, was that avant-garde area. We call it avant-garde, but it's so diminishing. It's so much more. I was rooted in tradition. But these things all came together in this band the first time we played. And I remember the horn players being just in awe of the folklorist, Puntilla being at the helm, and then the folklorist being in awe of the horn players. And I was going to say halftime. Intermission was like halftime of the game. Everybody was like hugging, and there's a lot to say about the spiritual connections. My personal way with that is my personal way, and I don't want to go into it yet, leaving room for everybody to feed into your inquiry. But I think the music is spiritual in nature. I think that jazz and Cuban music have a lot of things at the roots that are basically they're coming from the same place. They have the same roots, which is Africa. And I think that the bata are like the original funk. I mean, that's the funkiest stuff I've ever heard in my life. And the syncopation that's inherent to jazz is inherent to Cuban and Latin music in general. So that just, I'll leave it there so others can speak on it.
That's true what you're saying, Michelle, because it has actually been opined, it's been written about that that all of the rhythms and that we frequently think of as funk and salsa and jazz, and all of these rhythms are rooted in religious rhythms from Africa. And so it's I like to think of there being kind of an African rhythmic seed that is implanted in all those styles, and funk and jazz and Latin. And I think it all comes from a very specific set of rhythms that are found in the west coast of Africa and in northern Africa, the Chabi in Morocco. Those are all things that come together, and somehow they plant in the United States and in the New World, in Latin and South America and the Caribbean, and become candomble, they become joropo, they become son jarocho, but they come from the same place. And in some places they become jazz, in other places they become guaguancó, and yet still in other places it becomes Venezuelan, Afro-Peruvian, Afro-Andean, Afro-Colombian music. But these places all have their roots in the same focused areas of Africa where religious ritual predominated all musical expression. And so I'm not the first person to make the observation. I think there's a book called Secular Devotion, which opinions that all the musics that we love, all the popular contemporary musics of Western culture, really are rooted in religious rituals. So the next time you listen to somebody freestyling to some rap, be aware of where it comes from, because it's very much a religious transference of spirituality that takes place. And this is not to say that European Western classical music, however that is defined, isn't also part of a magical strain of things that we all grow up and love. We all play the piano and the violin and the very Western European traditions. But somehow when these traditions collide with this African seed, with this African rhythmic code, it becomes something new and different and wonderful. And I think that that's why I think all the music that we play, all the music that all of you play, and all the music that I love and listen to has a deeply, deeply spiritual dimension. And so I think that kind of talks to the larger, not individual sense of spirituality, but to the fact that this spirituality, this African spirituality, permeates everything that we do.
Amen.
And then in terms of Cuba, I mean, we've got Brazil, the largest African descendant population outside of Nigeria, but there's something that emanates from Cuba and has a particular historical connection to New York City and migration patterns. So would you talk more about that? Because it seems to emanate from your connection to people in communities, not in the first instance to formal institutions.
Could I backtrack for just 1 second about the spirituality? I wanted to get my 2 cents in, I mean, I believe that all music is spiritual in some sense, because it's vibrations and we're all made of vibrations. So, I don't believe you have to be a santero to play this music. I don't believe you have to be religious to play music. I know a lot of musicians who are better than me who aren't religious, But if you're going to study this music, I mean, you can learn all the cantos for the rishas and you can learn all the bata rhythms and you can play them great. But then, like Michelle said, you will have a bit of a deeper connection, or a lot of a deeper connection, if you understand the religion, and even more so if the religion means something to you personally. It'll take it to another level. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't need to be religious to play this music. I know a lot of musicians who are spiritual people who aren't subscribed to one religion, but it helps if you are spiritual, and it helps if you're a part of this religion to play this music. It helps you understand it more. Like Arturo said, I've also been told and observed myself, there's a saying that any rhythm you hear, you can find it somewhere in bata, in the bata vocabulary. It's in there somewhere, Pick a rhythm, we'll find it in there somewhere. That's my 2 cents on that topic.
Thank you.
I would just add that the bata seem to explore every nuance of rhythm. Well, it can't be every, but it sure seems like it. It's like the cracks between the cracks of time. And there's so much subtlety and beauty there that in one little flick of a feel, the entire feel can change. And yet it hasn't gone anywhere. It's gone a million miles away, but it's right where it was. Rhythm is pretty profound.
Well, as we continue to explore Cuba, a continuing conversation just on a personal level, although I'm not a musician, the great Julito Collazo was a dear, dear friend who spent a number of nights at our house and with our young children. And while I did not understand the formal dimensions of playing music, I was just very impressed by the seriousness of his studied approach. He would go to the Library of Congress, for example, and be looking up literature on Yoruba culture, this working class musician. So 2021, the Cuba Jazz Festival. What for you is the significance of this moment doing the concert contributions that you will make to the 2020 Cuba Jazz Festival, Havana Jazz Festival?
Well, I guess I can speak for myself. I guess just a little story about this particular performance is that, when this pandemic started and the shutdown started towards the end of March, I wasn't able to play with the band, and I started writing some music. I had written about 4 pieces and thinking of the band. And Marguerite from HotHouse said, well, we're doing this like series. Would you want to play? And so I came up with a solo violin version of these pieces. And I did it and it was June 10th, actually, that I performed it for the HotHouse. And then I decided that I wanted to work with a great arranger because, I can write tunes and so forth like that, but I'm not a great arranger. So I contacted Leandro Lopez Vardy, this wonderful pianist that's here in Chicago. And I said, hey, would you be interested in arranging this for the band? And he said, sure. And he did the first arrangement, and I looked at it and I realized it was like above and beyond. It was just amazing, And so he's done already 3. He's working on the 4th arrangement. And when this festival came up, I said, Leandro, would you want to play the piano and we can do these as duos? And he said, sure. And we worked out these pieces then for violin and piano. And next week, hopefully, we'll be getting together with John Leroy and working out, starting to develop this with the percussion and so forth. So this is a special time because, this music is written during this pandemic. And this is the first time it's going to be shared with anyone, really. And I think we've all sort of in the same page at this time. And a lot of the thought that went into this was the shared experience that we were having during this shutdown. And so for me personally, it makes it a significant thing to share at this time. And my heart goes out to people that are struggling in these situations. And I hope that there's some comfort that can be brought about because of the music,
For the others of you at this particular moment for the 2020 Havana Jazz Festival, is there a particular significance in addition to the pandemic moment?
We're not all playing there. I'm not, but I think it's virtual. That allows for some things maybe that couldn't have happened otherwise. Trying to put a good slant on it. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Same here. I'm not involved aside from this, but I'm looking forward to hearing it, and I'm glad that it's going through virtually. Everybody needs something now, especially in the dead of winter or the dead of quarantine.
In terms of our overarching theme, Cuba, a continuing conversation, each of you has talked about your direct ties to musicians, families, religious figures in Cuba. But in the last 25 years or so, there's just been an extraordinary number of Cuban musicians, particularly concentrated around, although not exclusively in New York City, who go back and forth. And I wonder what your interaction with them has been as a part of this continuing conversation with Cuba. It's rather than Cuba being just 90 miles away, sometimes it's literally around the block from you.
Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? It's not just to go to Cuba; it's also to come from Cuba and to go back and forth. Kind of the whole thing is that one of the things that I've always felt very strongly about was this idea that there was a disconnect between jazz and Afro-Cuban music. And so I always felt like what needed to happen and what has begun to happen, and thank God for musicians like David Varelis and so many musicians that are really conversant in so many different worlds. What used to be like that exotic music that they play down there, and where's the downbeat? Oh, and then the musicians down there would be like, oh, jazz, yeah, you guys are the real geniuses. And it just really pissed me off. And so I think that the more that there is an exchange of musicians musicians of American origin and Cuban origin that are traveling back and forth. I had the privilege of taking Rudresh Mahantapa and Michelle Rosewoman down to Cuba and seeing the kinds of response that people have to new information is akin to watching American musicians going down there and hear for the first time. I remember my trumpet player, my lead trumpet player in the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra, he went to a rumba in Havana, and he came back and he was in tears. He said, "I've never heard music before in my life." And this guy is bad. This guy's super, super bad. He's played with everybody and he's incredible. But he literally said with tears in his eyes, "I've never heard music before in my life." And so you have this thing that is so unbelievably important for the information, for the nutrition to flow freely from New York to Cuba. And it is interesting that you said New York, because New York is the place, the entry point of so many different cultures, as is Chicago. And New York is the entry point of so much of the information. Musicians come to New York and to Chicago, and they leave and go back to Venezuela or Cuba or Colombia or Mexico, for that matter. And to me, it's not complete if you go and you just leave Cuba, but going back and forth. Or if you leave New York and go in Cuba and stay there, you just have to go back and forth and exchange information, germinate ideas, create a fluid transfer that is bi-directional, and this is what you're talking about. Cuban musicians going back, the ones that live in New York. I think it's vitally important. Again, as I said, we're talking about so many great musicians: David Mireles, Junior, and Giovanni Terry. I had the privilege of meeting Don Terry a bunch of times, and wow, whoa. Yeah. Whoa. I mean, this is where Junior and Giovanni get their modern information from. This is where they get their pointillism and their avant-gardisms, is from their roots connecting directly to Don Terry. So, to me, this is exactly what you're saying is of huge importance. Let's open those channels of communication. Please, Joe Biden. Please, Joe Biden. Please.
Yeah, I'd like to say that it is really, it's all of it is so important, because the influx in although it was in the context, it was the influx in the early 80s. To any of us that were already immersed in Cuban music, we knew that was going to change the face of the music once and for all. And unquestionably, it took time for others to believe me. When I said, "Oh boy, things are about to change." And they really did, little by little. I think that the back and forth is an amazing thing, and I've had wonderful collaborations with Junior, with Yosvani, with Roman Filiu, and one of my most important, Roman Diaz, and this can't go by without me speaking further about our collaborations, which I'll do later. But what's so interesting to me is the musicians out of Santiago and Camagüey that seem to have, a sentiment that must come with whatever's in the water there, because there's this amazing connection with the bag artists and the AACM artists and the more free-form modernist approach to the music. It's like they live it, they are that naturally. And these collaborations that happen because of the fact that folks can go back and forth, when they can go back and forth, those flourish and they're nourished. And I guess it's all of our dreams that these things can happen for every reason, that they can happen, not just for the music, but for all the arts and the culture and the sharing of deep traditions, and for the hope of betterment and better living for Cubanos, because we can't help but feel in our hearts the pain of the struggle. My trips there have been similar to Arturo and Jean, which you spoke of, in terms of being deeply touched by the realities there, the difficulty, the struggle, la lucha, but the life and the givingness of the people and the exchange of music. I met in '96 when I went with Puntilla and some of his ahijados. I met Pancho Quinto. I met Roman Diaz. I met folks that, because I was able to go there, I met then. And because eventually they were able to come here, these collaborations could continue. So for us, that would be a dream come true out of our love for the evolution of the music and our hopes for all they could be.
I had a similar experience to what Arturo was mentioning. A friend of mine, Israel Berea Toto from Los Muñequitos, was visiting me when I lived in Vancouver. And I was playing a gig with a Canadian drummer who's not well known, but he's one of the best drummers I've ever played with in my life. His name was Ray Garraway, who unfortunately passed away by Betunu. But Toto, who's a percussionist and singer from Los Muñequitos, came to see this gig. And he came up to me, he goes, what are you guys doing? I don't understand. It's beautiful, but I don't know what you're doing. You know, which we think, how could you not know what we're doing? You know what I mean? You could do all this. So I said, just sit down with Ray, my drummer friend, play my percussion, you know, play with Ray. And of course, right away it worked. It was some of the most beautiful music I've heard in years, you know. And of course, Ray was asking about Toto, the Cuban percussionist. What is he doing? I don't understand it, but it's beautiful and it works. I don't know what's going on. And this just speaks to what Arturo was saying. We need to do more of that. We need to have more, you know, not just traveling back and forth to, not just Cubans coming here to perform Cuban music and go home, or us going there to perform jazz or study Cuban music and go home. It's got to be more traveling as like a guest artist with a group, or this guy goes as a guest artist with this group, and more interaction.
You know, it's funny. Even inter-island, like two years ago, I was performing at the first edition of the Jazz Plaza Santiago, and somehow we concocted this thing where we got Los Muñequitos playing with La Conga de los Hoyos, and it was the first time they'd ever done that. It was I couldn't believe I was freaked out. It was the first time in the history of these incredible bands that they played together. And so, I mean, even just from one end of the island to the other, there's such a need for exchange of information and cross-pollination of ideas and that spiritual connection that is at the root of all Cuban music.
Yeah, there's people, and when I would travel back and forth from Matanzas to Havana, there's people would say, you know, you've seen more of Cuba than me. You know, people just don't have that opportunity. Or even within Havana, I've been to, we went to a thing to celebrate Pancho Quinto's passing. And so all, you know, all different rumberos all came together for this. And it's a very rare event for these guys to meet up. Even the workshops that happen in Banff, the Banff Center for Fine Arts, Afro-Cubanismo, where you had Los Muñequitos and Matanzas, Afro-Cuba from Havana, Iraquere, Changuito, all on one campus for 10 days. That never happens, you know. So it was like a giant Cuban party every night. They're all playing together and mixing, and that never happens in Cuba. You know, it's more. James was mentioning when we had our preliminary meeting how it's kind of about the grind. Sometimes we're going to get our work done, and that exists in Cuba too. You know, I mean, they just got to do what they got to do, and you can't really afford to take a recreational trip across the city just to jam with a friend. I mean, you know, there's other priorities.
You know, I'm thinking about the Martin Luther King quote that I came across of his 1964 opening speech at the Berlin Jazz Festival, when he says, "Musicians bring order." You know, there is a way in which I think we who are not musicians think about the diversionary elevation, the good feeling, but you all have brought a deep humanities and religious context. But I wonder how you see yourselves as, I know Arturo, I like to refer to him as the musical diplomat of the United States, not just the Latino Cuban American diplomat vis-a-vis Cuba, but I know he has thought and articulated very strongly a formal orientation of being a whole person as a musician, not just someone who, quote unquote, entertains. And I wonder how you see yourselves in this bilateral relationship between Cuba and the United States, given the limitations against communication, the harshness that has been imposed on importating food to Cuba and the like, in which musicians, along with the rest of the population, suffer from?
Well, nothing stops the music. That's for sure. It always finds a way. And I guess that Cubans that are here have been in a better position to help their own in Cuba. Me, it hurts my heart. The realities. But I guess I won't speak a lot on that myself, other than to say that I hope for change that allows for a real different reality. In terms of how I see myself, because I don't flirt with the traditions, because I take them serious, because I'm involved spiritually, I delve in, I commit myself to going in such a way that I have the knowledge and tools that I need to do what I'm trying to do. And I think the nuance is what's come from our traveling back and forth, our exchange, and more of it, because originally jazz musicians would learn palito or cascara and feel like, I'm playing Cuban percussion. And I think that originally a lot of Cuban drummers would learn the swing pattern and feel like maybe they were playing swing. And little by little, it became apparent that the nuance that comes with time and the more you do it. So as the years pass, people are much more bilingual. There's much more ability to get to the same place at the same level. And so I don't know. I'm not sure, James, if I'm answering your question directly, because when it comes to the political aspects of it, I feel rather lost, because everything depends so much on an administration that we've been at the mercy of so many times, and not to mention us, much less Cuba. So I pray for change that way, because as a musician, as an artist, as a humanitarian, a human, we need that. I want that. And I know we all meet there. Someone else probably has more to say about all this.
Well, I think the question of cultural diplomacy is really important, because one has to ask what cultural diplomacy is. One has to ask whether you go to a people's and display your wares, or think about how rare and exotic their wares are. And there's kind of an exoticization of product on both sides that I think is really problematic. I do delve into politics and very often speak out against our politics and against theirs. It's inevitable that we have to be clear about it. Without saying a word, you're political. Just by setting foot in Cuba, you've made a statement. Just by playing Cuban music, you've made a statement. But the question I think that Michelle has so aptly raised is how much do you care? How authentic do you want to be about really assessing that culture and knowing it and paying respect to it? Because when you go down there and play just whatever you're going to play, you're not really absorbing, you're not really learning, you're not really paying respect. So cultural diplomacy is about establishing relations on equal footing. That's the part that's difficult. That's the part that politics will not allow us to do. The part that we really want to do is where we go, where a ship can dock with another ship, but if they're not of equal buoyancy, there's not going to be an exchange of goods or passengers. And so it's a real problem. It's a real problem, because we need to understand that when you go to a place like Cuba and you say thank you, you say, yes, I understand, I'm listening, I'm here, teach me. It's a lot different than when you go and say, let me teach you, let me show you how to swing, let me show you how to play. That's a whole different message. And I think that when you go into someone's home and absorb their kindness and their wisdom, you're humbling yourself. And that's just something that we haven't been able to do politically. I don't know whether it's a political thing or an administrative thing. I think this has been going on since the French occupied since the Spanish occupied. In every occupation of Cuba, there's been that unequal buoyancy, where this culture is better than that, this culture is better than this, and it's never about the Cuban, the real Cuban culture being equal. not superior, not inferior, but equal to the whatever powers and whatever administrations happen to float. Because remember, it's all temporary, as Michelle rightly pointed out. Right now, it's who knows, 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, who cares? But love of people and love of humanity, that's cultural diplomacy.
I think, we all have our political opinions, and some of us are more politically active than others. I'm not super politically active. I've got my opinions. But I think one thing that all of us do as musicians, whether or not it's by intention, is that we bring awareness to people. So, for example, the average American citizen, if you say Cuba, they think about rum and cigars and communism. If they don't know, that's the first thing that might pop into somebody's head. They don't know anything about anything. You say Cuba, that's what they think about. I think as musicians, if we, just by sharing the beauty of the music, that's one more thing that pops into somebody's head when they think about Cuba, is beautiful art. And then if you're working with students and you're educating, then you're teaching them, the depth of this art and why is it beautiful? Why do we like these melodies? Why do we like these syncopations? And it just adds more weight behind what pops into somebody's head when you say the word Cuba. They don't just think of, poor hungry people in a communist country that have a lot of rum scars. They think about beautiful art. And with beautiful art comes usually beautiful people and beautiful culture for the most part, right? So hopefully, it generates at least a little bit of, sympathy for what's actually going on. So then for let's say this random student or audience member, after they see a concert or have a class with us, then there's something, there's always a little passing blip in the news about Cuba. They never spend much time on it, but it'll catch their ear and they'll go, yeah, Cuba's got good music, and I had this guest artist who was Cuban percussion, and the people I've met are cool, and that's a little tiny bit we could do,
In the context of the harsh relationship from the U.S. government towards Cuba over the last 4 years, one of the bright moments in which artists of various genres, but certainly musical artists, played a very important role was the Kennedy Center's major presentation of Cuban art. I think Arturo was involved in that with Alicia Adams, who's a former dancer and African-American vice president for international programming at the Kennedy Center. It was an astounding reflection, I think, again, as I was reading the Martin Luther King quote of bringing meaning and order in the relationship that was otherwise a very harsh relationship. And it was very interesting to me that in July 2019, Danny Glover, the actor, my dear brother with whom I do a lot of work, when we asked to meet with Cuban President Diaz-Canel, the first thing he said to us is the cultural bridge is the best thing going on between our two nations. We didn't talk hard politics, but he went right to the role of what I like to think about as the role of the citizen artist. And it strikes me that this 2021 Havana Jazz Festival contribution that some of you will be making and that this panel will be tied to is another one of those potential moments along the lines of cultural diversity, a cultural diplomacy in which musicians are bringing meaning and order in an otherwise really rough kind of bilateral relationship. I wonder how that resonates for you.
Well, I was just having a conversation the other day, and in Chicago, there was a place called the Velvet Lounge, and Fred Anderson ran the Velvet Lounge for many years, and it was it was a place where people would go to develop their sound, and a lot of people in the AACM performed at the Velvet Lounge, and a lot of people that were in the intuitive music scene developed their approach at the Velvet Lounge, and it was never about commerce at the Velvet Lounge. I mean, many times you would go there and there would just be like 4 people, you know, and it was never about, you know, how many people can we get in here or anything like that. But Fred Anderson, who ran the Velvet Lounge, whenever you would ask him, you know, about a different group, he never rated the group or said, well, this group is good or this group. He would just say, well, you know, they got their thing, you know, and everybody's got their thing. And that's what's beautiful about music, is that we are all equal, you know. Every culture's equal, every group of people's equal, and as long as you're true to your thing, then you're bringing value, you know. As long as you're honest with your thing, your thing is going to lift everybody up around you, you know. And I think that's what's so great about exchanging with Cuba, or, you know, if we're coming to the exchange honestly, we are all equal and we're just all lifting each other up. And it really breaks down a lot of these walls, you know. It just opens everything up, and it's so inspiring to hear all these conversations that everyone is sharing their thoughts on Cuba and the culture. And you just get the sense that when we all come together and we're bringing ourselves in a genuine sense, that, you know, it's an uplifting situation that's rich beyond measure, you know, and you walk out and you feel like a free man, you know. You walk out and it's like, it's all good, you know. So I think that's just some thoughts I had on what you were saying.
We're also unique if we pursue that fire within us. And it's so interesting where some of us come out in the same place from different parts of the world. Music really is the bridge. I mean, we as musicians, we can serve that function depending on if we are receiving from different sources, and we choose to bring them together. By receiving, I mean in a profound way. If you're receiving on a certain level, not in a meant to be kind of way, then maybe you have tools to serve a function as a bridge. And I think of certain people. I'm thinking of Pancho Ibae. He was a foundational folklorist and traditionalist, but he was like a mad scientist, creative jazz type musician too. He told me that he had plans to do a recording with Rio Concolo. And I was like, oh shoot, what would people think, you know? Because I was like, yeah, Pancho, wow, you know. And then I think of people like Roman Diaz, who is a real bridge. Roman plays with everybody, and somehow various musical worlds are one in his heart and his being, as they are in mine, as they are in each of you. And so, like you say, Arturo, and like you say, like everybody says, we are making a statement that matters in our way. My mother was an artist, a visual artist. My father was an educator that sought to affect people on a massive level. As an educator, I value them both. One was a very personal way, which is more my way, and the other was through outreach of a different kind. So I like to think that all these things are a part of who I am. It does matter to me to resonate in a pure place. And you can hardly go up into Cuban culture and be welcomed and not be touched, moved, and changed and driven to further great things when you see people with so little that are so much. And we need to meet all of our challenges and acknowledge the greatness in those that don't have anything like what we have to do what we do with. So I might be rambling and ambling, and I hope not, but I just feel that we're all very connected through the music and through the art, through the culture, and that's a profound connectivity.
I think you're very much on point, Michelle. And as we move to start to wind down our conversation, a couple of points I'd like to ask you to, all of you, to respond to, and then see what closing points you might want to make. Is all of you have talked about your spiritual / religious connections, your very personal ties to individual musicians or groups of musicians. But would you talk about Cuban cultural policy and audiences in Cuba for music? What's your thinking about how Cubans are educated about various musical genres and how they respond compared to not other just US audiences, but to global audiences that you encounter around your music?
Well, I mean, I think the first order of business is to address that culture is a much bigger proponent or much bigger component of, it's much more of the currency than it is here or anywhere else. I find that culture, historical culture, understanding one's culture, these folks may not have the wealth of a Scarsdale suburb, but they have a local historian and a treasure trove of information about where the people came from, how they got there, what kind of music and religious practices are associated with this place. I mean, the thing that I find remarkable is this knowledge of self, that culture and pride and understanding of who you are and where your neighborhood comes from. So in a way, I think when I think of Cubans, I think of them as very, forget about the fact that you're talking education, because they just get that. I mean, it's a matter of they just get it. And if they're good and if they're smart, they'll get into the Instituto Superior, everything. I mean, this is paid for. They're not walking away from 4 years of the equivalent of a Harvard graduation with $200,000 worth of debt, you know? So that already right there. So education, medicine, and some people, yes, the medicine is this or that. Medicine is super dope in Cuba. And they have incredible medical personnel who they send, as we noted earlier, all around the world. But what it is this love of understanding. To me, that's what culture is. Culture is a currency. It's a fluid. It's knowing why you dress, how you sing, how you marry, how you die, how you take care of the rituals of day-to-day life and activity. And Cubans understand their culture. And that's really what makes them super informed, super compassionate, and super just, you know, and of course, the struggles of Cuba, they're part of that culture too. And so they understand in the midst of a great lack that they actually have love of self, love of community, love of block, love of their neighbors. There's not a single house in Cuba where somebody doesn't know everybody's business. It's just life. It's life in a village. It's life in Africa. It's life where it really takes place on the street, and it's lateral. It's not. It's horizontal. It's what life is about, and that's why I think, you know, these people are that is the currency, is culture.
I think there's a connection between, you know, this also goes back to the, you know, how spiritually full or empty people are. So if you take an example, some people are going to get mad at me about this, and I might even get edited out, but if you take, let's say we take an example like Cuba, Europe, US. Who's got the most money? US. In the middle, Europe. The least, Cuba. Who's got the deepest culture? Cuba. In the middle again, Europe. Shallowest culture here. You know, sorry. Who's got the best education? For the money. The poorest country. So they've got the best education, the deepest appreciation for art, which comes with having a culture. So it's like this inverse relationship, you know, that gets, so, you know, as far as the audience, like everybody else, I'm basically agreeing with everybody else. I think that the group of people with a deep connection to culture are going to be the best audience for an art form. And it just happens to be, you know, inversely proportionate to money. You know, I'm not going to speculate as to why. That's not really the point of this conversation, but it's true. I will say that they don't have 90,000 channels on their TV right now like we do here. You know, there's that.
Let's say a lot taken for granted. A lot.
Well, that has certainly been my experience in my years of working in cultural heritage policy at the Smithsonian with Tradiciones Populares, Portadoras de Tradiciones Populares. We were just amazed when our curators and folklorists started working with the Ministry of Culture and with tradition bearers in Cuba of how much they know in the most minutest way about their local communities. I have done research all over Latin America with folklorists and anthropologists and ministers of culture. And as Jean-Christophe has pointed out, the focus, not just from the vantage point of government structures of knowing that, but of people in the communities. This is a part of the conversation. Luis Bocco Salome, who was a bass player who lived in Washington, was considered the father of Latin music in Washington, D.C., coming to his house and how musicians would come and how everybody knew everybody's uncle, their grandmother, their cousins. This is how they reference. It was always the sociology of the broader community in order to talk about a particular musical date. You would learn all of this social history. So there is something in the community transmission of ways of knowing and doing, it seems to me, in Cuba that is also reflected at the level of cultural policy. I'm working on a ballet project involving Cuba, and I've gone to ballet, which is not my field, in Cuba. And I'm just amazed at how ordinary, everyday audiences come and are very attentive, and the same way they are at jazz concerts or at hip hop concerts and the like. Can you talk a little about any of the projects, exchange projects that you all are involved in at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but you said something so important. I can't let it slip. One of the reasons why the average person in Cuba could sit in on a ballet, and I've done a lot of ballet work with Cuba. I've done a lot of composing for Malpaso and different ballet companies. One of the reasons is because they don't clothe the arts in elitism. The arts are not used as a way to demarcate yourself from everyone else. Education, you can't possibly demarcate from yourself from everybody else. Everybody's educated. Just like you can't demarcate, you can't separate yourself out from everybody else if everybody knows what ballet is and classical music, and that you can't use it to socioeconomically deprive someone else of opportunity. So I think that the first thing we need to recognize is that Cuba does not use elitism. Now, there is elitism in Cuba of a different sort, but it's not used to separate one person from another. I forgot your point, but I get so passionate about that because I think one of the worst things that can happen is when you make something elite. Art is that's so anathema to art. That's so anathema to sharing. That's so anathema to growing. And so, yeah, so I went off on that tangent for a second. I forgot what your question is.
It hurts the art and the people.
Oh, what the latest thing is. So there's a beautiful sequence in a Cuban film, La Escoba. It's an old Cuban film, and I just re-scored that, and I'm in the process of doing this wonderful project with a further conversation, continued type recording that I'm doing with a band leader in Santiago, and I'm going to continue to do projects with Cuba until I drop, because it's such a source of nutrition for everything that I love and live for.
James, are you involved in any present collaborations with Cuba?
No. I'm just I'm just a Chicago guy. I live down the block. But I mean, I want, I look forward to having a chance to maybe, going to Cuba a lot more. And I did go to Dominican Republic a lot, growing up with my mom and the family. But yeah, I'm just enjoying learning more and more from everybody here.
Michelle, any present collaborations going on?
I think you're muted, Michelle.
You're muted.
I sure was. Okay. Yeah, I want to say that I've been so blessed for so long to be somehow surrounded at all times by great tamboreros. Feri Funchango every day. These associations have continuously opened doors to projects, to my own depth of knowledge. So step by step, I'm where I am now due to the steps that kind of begun with Puntilla, and through Pancho and Puntilla, I came to know Roman Diaz because they sent him to me, and I was really, have to say, moved beyond words when he told me that when he still lived in Cuba, it was his dream to play with New Yoruba. You can only imagine what that might mean to me. So he became, New Yoruba existed for 30 years before it recorded. And finally in 2013, we did record. Unfortunately, Puntilla had passed, but I had Pedrito Martinez and Roman with me. Then the next stage was that Roman became very central to the group. And recently we released a recording called Hallowed, which I built a commissioned work entirely on the Oru Igbodu, the Oru Seco, written through, which meant I had to immerse myself beyond everything I had thus far. And I used the contours and the shape of the Oru Seco that Roman plays, each one having their unique style and sound and at times sequence. So Roman and I have collaborated in ways that are now leading to more collaborations. And we recently did a virtual performance for the Timbalaye festival that was virtual this year for the first time. So they were able to invite Roman, and he invited me. So that was a wonderful project. Currently, we're working on, I'm trying to get a grant for a project I have in mind that would further what we've begun in this new virtual reality. That would be that, and a commissioned work that I'm writing that could end up being brought into context with more percussion. So as far as current projects, that would be where my focus is at the moment.
Jean-Christophe, any current projects with Cuba?
Well, I was supposed to go to Cuba this past summer. As we all know, that didn't work out. So basically, I'm just on hold. Everything is almost just barely. It's not at a standstill, but it's not far off. I usually, like I said, I stay with my padrino, Julio Guy Lopez, down there. And when I'm there, it's become a whole scene. We talk about the neighborhoods in Cuba. So, it just so happens that one block away are the people that I play and study bata and rumba with a lot when I'm in Havana. So there's a group called Timbalaye in Havana, not to be confused with Ralph Izari, but there's a group called Timbalaye in Havana that's good, real modern Havana style rumba group, and they also are all Anya drummers. So when I'm there, I'm either doing Ifa work with my padrino, or learning how to do Ifa work, I should say, or playing tamboleros, or playing with these guys at rumba clubs. So, the money is sitting right next to my chango, waiting for COVID to end so I can get on a plane and go down there.
Any closing comments in this conversation, James?
I wasn't raising my hand or anything, but yeah, it's just great to be a part of this, like I stated earlier, and thank you for moderating this discussion so beautifully today, James. And it's a great pleasure to be a part of this with everyone on the panel. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Marguerite Horsberg from HotHouse. I want to thank all of you. I'm thinking a lot about the Martin Luther King quote that the musicians bring meaning and order. And I think all of your comments about your particular experiences, your views about community, about humanity and spirituality, is a part of the ongoing conversation that we now need to bring forth to our governments on both sides, because you as the musicians are bringing not only uplift and joy and humanistic projections, but you're also building those bridges that we need to cross. So I want to thank all of you for Cuba. The conversation continues.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, James.